Here's the solution to number 3, and I'm going to do number 4 at the same time. So in Visual Studio Code, it asks you to save it as marksabove80.py. So I'm going to go to Visual Studio, marksabove80.py. So I'll go back here, Python, new file, marksabove80.py. Here's the instructions. So I've got number 3, and I'm going to just make sure that I can see everything all at the same time here. And I'll leave number 4 there as well, so we can see everything now. Number 3, ask them for 5 marks. So just like number 2, we'll need a way to save these 5 marks. And one way to do it would be to have 5 separate variables. But think of a situation where, let's say there's a marathon and there are several hundred people in the marathon, and we have a program that saves all of their information. And let's say that the marathon allows new people to join. Well, we don't know how many people are going to join the marathon. So we need to have a list with, perhaps a list would be, there are other ways of storing things dynamically that don't have a certain set size. We can actually add to lists as well. We haven't learned that yet using the append command, but I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. Anyway, a list is a great thing to use because it keeps everything together. And once again, these are variables all the same type. When we're talking about marks, we could use float or we could use integer. I'm just going to use integer for now. So let's use, and remember, Python figures out what kind of a variable or a list it is based on the type of information you have in it. Because there's only five marks, I'm going to say marks equals 5 zeros for now. There's another way of doing it dynamically. I'll show you later on. And we want to get all of the marks, 5 marks from the user. So we'll have our for loop, very similar to the last one, except instead of 5 random numbers, we're going to actually ask them for marks. 0 to 5. And we're going to say marks at location C. At any point during this video, if you haven't completed it yet and you weren't sure how to start, or maybe you were stuck on something, take a look at the line that maybe you were stuck on, add it to your program, and then see if that helps you to do the rest of it or part of it yourself before watching the rest of the video. That's really going to benefit you, because then remember, you're exercising your problem solving skill. It's just like exercising a muscle. It's like, you know, you go to the gym and maybe you can't lift the set of weights you want to, so you start off with the lower one and you go from there and you're able to lift them, and then the next time becomes a little bit easier. So don't get discouraged if you don't know how to start. It's great that you can see these videos, watch the first couple lines, and if you know what to do from this step, or you can compare what you did in your last program and say, I mean, I'm going to do an input statement next. So if you want to pause the video and try to do that yourself, that's a good place to stop, to pause and then try it and then see what I do and see how you can. Anyway, as I go forward now, we're going to say int input, enter a mark. And I'm going to put a space there so that there's a space that appears just before the end of the quote. I put the space so that it appears there, because remember, this is a prompt for the user, so I want a space to appear after the colon. I don't want my blinking cursor to appear for the user right at the colon. And that gets all 5 marks. That's it for getting the marks. The next step is to only output the marks that are above 80. So what we had is this, the marks equals all the square brace stuff. That's setting things up. So we decided we had to use a list to store things, decided the structure. The next 2 lines that I just programmed were the input. And now we're going to have the output. And the output involves a bit of pre-processing. So I'm going to use the variable C for counting again. We're stepping through all 5 variables, and, well, we could just say this, print marks at location C. That would print out all the marks, but we want to do some pre-processing. We want to only print out the marks that are above 80. So we're going to do a comparison, kind of like a gatekeeper. So, or somebody who's at a door, there's like a bouncer at a door and they only let certain people in, people that have a big number printed on their chest that's above 80. So we could do that. So if marks at location C is greater than 80, you have to know the sign pointing to the right is the greater than sign. You can space this out to make it look a bit better. And I'm going to have to tab this print statement in one more time so it's inside of the if statement. All right, let's try out our program. I think that's pretty much it for number 3, and then we'll do number 4 because it's a continuation of number 3. So run Python file and enter a mark. So I'll put in 90, 75, 80, 81, and 99. And it only prints out the marks that are above 80. Okay, so number 3 is done. Number 4, we're going to add to number 3. We want to ask the user for the name of each student. There's different ways of doing this, but I'm going to reuse the first loop that's already there. So I think it makes sense. So the whole idea here is each mark is for a different student. And you kind of had to read between the lines to see that. But if you did this a different way, then that's fine too. The way that I'm interpreting this question is each student has a different mark. So I'm thinking we probably want to know what their name is before the mark. So I'm going to insert a line here, and I'm going to say names at location C is equal to, and I don't need int because names are going to be string. Input, the input statement by default takes a string, so we don't have to put anything there. Enter the student's name. And we'll get a syntax error because name is not defined. So we're going to have to make the names list over here. So for now, because of this is what we know, we're going to do it like that. 5 locations. That can be a real pain if there's like 10 or 20. But don't worry, when we get there, I'll show you an easier way. All right, so we have our setup, and then we have our input. And finally, when we output the mark, we want to output their name along with the mark. And it says, hint, you'll need 2 lists. So all I'm going to do is insert a print statement here, use the existing for loop and if statement, and I'm just going to say print names at location C. So I want you to think of names and marks as something I'm going to call parallel lists, meaning that names at location 0 and marks at location 0, that's the same student. Names at location 1, marks at location 1 are the same student. So let's try it out and see if this makes any sense. So run Python file. It's asking me for the student's name. So I'm going to put Bob again because I'm super creative. His mark is 80, 81. He just makes it. Enter a student's name. Let's say Jen. And what is her mark? Her mark is going to be 90. And then we have a student named Horace who doesn't quite make it. He gets a 79. Doesn't make it past 80. And then we have Jules who gets 67. And finally we have Newton who gets a 98. And so the output is okay. It does show everything. This could get a bit confusing for the user that's using this. It's showing Bob 81, but then Jen is right next to it. So what I would do to improve this program, just by looking at the output, is I'd do this. I would do comma and equals nothing. Actually, the end, I'm going to put a colon equals, because you can put anything for the end. So instead of a new line, I'm putting a colon equals. So when we run it, it's going to look a little bit nicer. Not really part of the program, but just user friendliness and making things easy to use is a really important part of programming. So Bob, I don't remember what he had, 81 I think, and then Horace, he got a 79. So here's some people. Gertrude, I don't know anyone named Gertrude, 56, she didn't do too well. Harold, 99. Bea, 87. So now the output is in a more user-friendly format, as you can see, and that's it for number 3 and 4. See you next time.